Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 100. And the title of this episode is The Dam is About to Burst, and Nobody Can Stop It. Well, basically, the world right now is in crisis mode. Europe is having problems. The Mideast is having problems. Japan is having problems. And the United States, everything is perfect here. So we have nothing to worry about. And basically, the illusion and everything that's going on here, people really don't realize the problems that are occurring because the news just doesn't, report on them. And basically, since banks are losing tons of money, the only way they know how to recoup and make money is by using fees. So what the major banks are doing now, and these are the big Wall Street banks, and these banks consist of J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup. They are starting to use basically payroll bank cards and paying people on these cards. So it's basically like paying people on a gift card. And they control the accounts, and every time you use them, there's a fee. Every time you go to withdraw, every time that you want a paper statement, every time you lose your card, there's fee. And on these low-end employees who work at Walmart, Home Depot, Walgreens, Taco Bell, most of these fees are larger than what they make or erode what they make, and they end up making even less from getting their payment this way. And for some, it might be easier and better, but in the long run, by continually using this, they're just going to tack on fee upon fee upon fee. And basically, here are some examples of what those fees are. And they quickly add up when you use them. Like $1.75 to make a withdrawal from most ATMs, $2.95 for a paper statement, $6 to replace a card. Some users who have these payroll cards have to pay $7 in activity fees for not using their cards. So we can see how this is the new norm coming into the system and basically targeted for those people who are not making that much money. And for the little that they make, the big Wall Street banks are basically raping them with all these fees. And if you noticed, even with checking and savings and all of this, the fees have gotten completely out of control, and banks are trying to make up for all of their losses and all of their bad investments by charging everyone a fee. Now, I remember there was a time that when you opened up an account, you would get a TV, a toaster, or something with a certain amount of money that you deposited into that account. Today, you see none of this. They used to reward you for opening an account. They used to reward you with no fees. They used to reward you with some type of gift of saying thank you for putting your money and your trust in our bank. But all those small banks and all those mom and pop type of banks are all completely gone, or almost all completely gone, and now the big Wall Street banks have taken over, and they are just raping everyone with ridiculous fees. For everything you do, there's a fee if you blink. If there's a fee if you look at your account, there's a fee if you click on this button. So it really is getting out of hand. And I've said this back in my other episodes. When the people start getting taxed and there are more laws, more regulations, and more is taken from you, we are getting closer to the collapse, because they're just scraping at the bottom of the barrel trying to get whatever they possibly can before everything completely falls apart. Okay, let's move on here. Now, the job report from ADP came out, and they said they added 188,000 jobs, but as we always know, that these jobs are always revised, and basically it really is meaningless, because if you look at what the real job numbers are and you look at the percentage of people that are out of work, it's around 23% because they have changed the calculation of unemployment. And if you'd like to see the real calculation that they used before they changed everything, you can go to shadowstats.com, and on that site, he shows you right on the front page, or you might have to go up to the top link and choose unemployment, GDP, or inflation, and he shows you what the government's unemployment is compared to the old calculation of how they used to do the unemployment, and that is hovering around 23% or so. Now, France wants to temporarily suspend trade talks with the U.S. over NSA spying. Now, of course they do, because they don't know what information the United States government learned about this, and how can this deal be honest between two nations, between many nations. And it basically goes on to say France wants to delay the biggest bilateral trade deal in history by 2 weeks after learning the USA has allegedly been tracking economic communications of EU member states. And again, if they are all in this together, why would they need to spy? The only reason you do this is to get an advantage over someone else. And basically, the EU states are realizing this, and they're putting the halt on everything. They're saying, whoa, 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 let's stop here. Now, Portugal and Greece are now vying to be this week's crisis in Europe. We've had Cyprus, which was downgraded by S&P and Moody's. They recently have been pushed back up to, I believe, a triple C or a negative triple C after they did their debt exchange, because they have longer maturities on their debt, but they still have the debt, and they'll be taking on some more debt, because when you have, for some reason, credit agencies love when you have lots of debt and you're making those payments on tons and tons of debt, and they think you're a good risk. See, I think it's the opposite. You have so much debt, you're barely getting by and making the minimum payment, you're a bad risk, because anything can set off you defaulting on everything. I'd rather have someone that has no debt that pays off pays off everything completely on time and has no debt. That to me is a very good risk. This basically, it just shows you, who can we give the most debt to, and who are these people that would just go ahead and scrape by and worry about making their minimum payment on this huge debt load. We'll give them a good credit rating so they can take on some more debt. And who cares if they can feed their family or not? As long as we know they'll make that minimum payment because they're worried, that's the people we need. And it feels like they're doing the same thing with the countries. The countries with more and more debt get great credit ratings. Look at the U.S. I mean, the biggest debtor nation, and I hate saying that, the United States has 17 trillion worth of debt. Actually, it's more if you count in all the other stuff, but let's just use 17 trillion. $17 trillion, and their credit, the rating from these credit agencies is very high. But any little thing can set it off, and it becomes defaulted on, and all this debt can't be repaid. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. But this goes on to say that Portugal and Greece, they're having very tough times. Unemployment is very, very high, and this is spreading throughout Europe. It's Cyprus. I mean, they can pretend, they can move the credit ratings up or down. These are the same credit rating agencies that were telling us that these, the real estate subprime security bundles were AAA, and everything was great, and they had them at these AAA scores, even when the default, even when the collapse was happening. they still had them at these great ratings, even though, like Goldman Sachs, as they were selling these things to people, they were betting against it because they knew it was crap. Okay, let's move on here. Now, S&P, talking about Moody's and S&P and P and all these credit ratings agencies, S&P cut the ratings on Deutsche Bank, Barclays, and Credit Suisse, and they dropped them basically from an A plus to an A, and they probably should be much further down. But this is how it begins. And again, who can trust what S&P has to say? They are all kind of folded. S&P kind of folded when the United States government sued them, and they wouldn't give because S&P downgraded the United States the first time, and the United States stopped them from downgrading them a second time by suing them, and basically they didn't give a rating. But now, Obamacare, we talked a lot about Obamacare, and basically they're holding off on the employer mandate until 2015. And this is where basically the businesses had to have a certain, if they went over a certain number of employees or they had a certain number of hours, either you take health insurance or get penalized. And basically it looks like the government, the Congress, Senate woke up, read it after the fact and basically had, the oh shit, look what this says here. We're going to destroy the economy with this and the job market with this, and we are not ready to do this. And I believe that everyone's starting to realize this, and they are not ready for the collapse. They still have certain things they're trying to accomplish, and especially the Obama administration, central bankers, and they realized if they passed this right now, everything would come crumbling down. And they're so far removed from the everyday person. They don't even realize, you know, what is going on. And that little Fed test of the tapering, they did a little test to see what would happen. And basically, the economy is not well enough, which it will never be well enough, where they're able to remove the Fed from what it's doing, because I hate to say it, the Fed is the market. The Fed is the stock market. The Fed is the treasury bond market. The Fed is the housing market. They are everything. They're the only ones in there. They're the only ones that have the money. Why do they have the money? Because they can print the money. And they're the ones who are running everything. And if they released the Obamacare in 2014, it would just collapse everything so quickly, and they're realizing this, so they're putting it off. Okay, let's move on here. Now, the Dow, it's funny. Today's July 3rd, tomorrow's July 4th. The market's closed early today. And if you looked at Asia, and you looked at Europe, and then you look at the United States, Europe, all the markets were down. Asia, all the markets were down. The United States, the markets are up. The markets are up. The stock market is closed July 4th. Everyone feels good. Everyone feels great. The plunge protection high-frequency traders pushed it up as best they can. It doesn't matter that there's a euro crisis. It doesn't matter that there's a Middle East crisis. It doesn't matter that all the other markets are down. They just want everyone feeling good for July 4th. It makes no difference. And this is how they ended it. They usually end it on a good note on Friday. This time they're ending it on a good note before the holiday. Now, there was an interesting article that said mortgage apps plunge at the fastest rate in over 3 years. And basically, the economists assured us that while mortgage rates go up, real estate will continue to boom. Now, to me, when mortgage rates go up, people they get less of a loan, because of the calculation of their ratio of going to buy a house and what they're making. If the rates go up, that means they have to pay more, so the amount of money they receive from the bank goes down. And each time the rate goes up, they get less and less and less. So basically, with the unemployment rate around 23%, with tons of foreclosures still on the books with banks because the Fed is still paying the 40 to 45 billion each month to take these toxic real estate loans off the bank's books, still going on, with the Fed still buying Treasury bonds every single month for 40 to 45. Probably it's more. It's probably in stealth and we don't even know about it. They can't figure out that if interest rates on mortgages go up, that the mortgage apps are going to decline. Well, of course they are, because people are barely affording the homes they have now, and those people who are buying new houses, the only way they can buy them is with no money down because they have no money. So if they were just squeaking by purchasing a home with no money down and you raise the rate, boom, they're out of the market. Raise the rate again, more people out of the market. This is common sense. Okay, let's move on here. Now, Obama is basically going back to saying, see, since we have the sequester, we're going to have to cancel the fireworks on military bases, on Fort Bragg, the Shore Air Force Base, Pearl Harbor, Hickam, McGuire, Dix, Lakehurst. But what's funny is he can spend $100 million going to Africa. He can basically send billions of dollars over to Syria and ship weapons. The U.S. State Department can spend $630,000 on Facebook likes, but fireworks, no, that's where they draw the line with the sequester. Forget it. No fireworks. Are you freaking kidding me? I mean, if you notice, he always uses the sequester so the people can see it. And this is like one point. Oh well, the air traffic controllers or the fireworks, the sequester just came in. Oh, the border patrol. See, we're letting more immigrants in. That's because of the sequester. It's always those areas that he always lets you know where the sequester is hitting. Okay, now we've learned that, in Egypt, Army ousts Morsi and they suspend the constitution there. President Mohamed Morsi has been stripped of his power by the Egyptian army, and the constitution has been suspended. Basically, Egypt's Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court will become the interim president right now. And this was a massive, from what we see from the news and what we see on video, this was a massive uprising of the people, and they're just having revolution after revolution. But my question is, now, the people, and let's compare this for a second. In Syria, they're telling us there's an uprising, and there's a revolution going on to overthrow Assad. In Egypt, they were having a revolution to overthrow the president of Egypt. Why are we in Syria, and why in Egypt did this happen so quickly? Let's think about that for a second. Millions of people, or hundreds of thousands, I didn't count them all, but there were a lot, all band together, and they said, this is what we want. In Syria, there's a few Syrians who want Assad out. How come we are sending weapons? How come we're so involved? But in Egypt's revolution, or whatever you want to call it, overthrow, the coup, it doesn't really matter, we stayed and stepped back. Very interesting, isn't it? Very, very interesting how when the people really speak, most of the time it happens peacefully. I mean, unless the government doesn't want to be removed and they're going to stick to their guns, then it doesn't. In Syria, why don't we let them fight their own battles just like Egypt did? Makes sense to me. Let's pull everything out. If there's really a revolution really going on, let it happen. All right, let's move on here. Now, the U.S. Postal Service is logging all mail for the law enforcement agencies. Leslie James Pickering noticed something odd in his mail last September, a handwritten card apparently delivered by mistake with instructions for postal workers to pay special attention to the letters and packages sent to his home. Mr. Pickering was targeted by a long-time surveillance system called mail covers, but that is the only forerunner of a vastly more expensive effort, the Mail Isolation Control and Tracking Program, in which Postal Service computer photograph the exterior of every piece of paper mail that is processed in the United States. So they're not just spying on everyone through phone calls, through the internet, through cameras on the street. They're also doing it through the mail. And again, it is probably all going back to the same thing. Find out who is receiving this type of information from who so they can map the connections to who knows who and where people and what groups they belong to. It's very easy to map who the gun owners are using the postal system, because if they take a picture and they have OCR, which can read the text from the pictures they're taking, they can put everyone that receives the NRA magazine or any other type of military, gun, special type of group. They can start singling out those people, and they know which groups you belong to. Now let's move on here. Let's move on to cyber attacks. Now, Washington, in the Washington Post, columnist Samuelson writes, "We should abolish the internet." In probably the most severe warning of cyber war, Washington Post columnist Robert J. Samuelson says he'd like to abolish the internet. It's almost like what we saw with Mayor Bloomberg and the constitutional lawyer from, I believe it was Harvard or Cornell, one of those colleges, where they believe the Constitution is out of date, and we might, start to think about removing the Constitution or changing it to so it would work with the modern times. Basically, it goes on to say nations, terrorists, or hackers can use the internet to disrupt or destroy power grids, pipelines, communication, and financial system, businesses, railroads, and airlines and databases. The list runs on. So much depends on the internet that its vulnerability to sabotage invites doomsday visions of the breakdown of order and trust, he warns. Plus, the report says hackers could hit the U.S. military hard, disarming weapons, directing them against their own troops. And it goes on to say, want real chaos? Destroy confidence in the banking system, or even part of it, and just stand back and watch. Basically, first of all, who has any confidence in the banking system? But then again, if a cyber attack were to hit the banking system straight on, and people saw their accounts and the money disappearing, it would wake people up. And basically this says the banking system is built on trust. It's slow to establish and fragile to keep. That trust must be fiercely protected. And basically, I don't know how much trust the banks have anymore with all these bailouts and the bail-ins that are happening. But again, he's making the point here that not just with cyber attacks, this is leading into many different things. The government has to control the flow of information. They've already controlled the mainstream media 5 corporations own the media system, especially the Associated Press. So they have control. And this goes back to 1913 when they just weren't going to control the monetary system. They also need to control the flow of information. Since the internet, which they couldn't foresee this happening, the internet is like the Wild West. They have no control over it. They have no control of other alternative news media outlets, channels opening up and explaining things and showing different sides to the same story. They do not like this. They need to control it. This is why they have continually reintroduced CISPA into the government, and now it's pending again in the Senate, waiting for something to happen. They would like to shut down the internet altogether. As discussed in previous episode, they have already created a separate system that the government would use, a separate internet which is wireless, running on a 4G network. And if you go back to, I think it was maybe 6 or 7 episodes or 5 or something like that back, there was a news report on this, and it would be encrypted and separate and apart from the internet. So they have no problem shutting down the internet because they have something already established. They don't want people out there making it harder for them to carry on false flags, like for instance Boston bombing. There were too many pictures. They shut the cell phones off, which they really didn't shut them off. They shut the cell towers off so people couldn't transfer information back and forth. What they didn't realize is that when the phones are not connected to the cell towers, they can still take pictures, and when it turned back on, basically people were allowed to send pictures, and that's why the FBI wanted to see every picture that every person had so they can see what story they were going to make up for the Boston bombing. And since this time, in one of my previous episodes, they came out saying that they don't believe that the cell tower kill type of action they did from the DHS was enough. It would be better if they had a kill switch on each and every person's cell phone, which would make them inoperable in time of crisis. And it's easy to do by just having an update in the software download to your phone without you even knowing that it's embedded in there. And all the new phones would just, have it already built in. And basically, this is what they're trying to control. They're trying to warn us that cyber attacks are coming. They will hit the banks. They will hit key infrastructure areas like water, electrical, nuclear. Plus, do we really need the internet? Is it really worth having because of all the trouble that's coming out of the internet? And this is basically what they're going on to say. Now, staying with the internet, basically Reddit, Mozilla, and thousands of people set for July 4th NSA spying protest, and they're going to basically have a Fourth Amendment protest against the United States government, saying that this is completely unconstitutional and the government is not allowed to have surveillance on the internet or spy on internet users. And they're going to even go further than this. They're going to have a offline march in New York, Boston, Washington, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, and Atlanta. And basically they want to have 10, 20, 30, 40, as many people as they can, thousands upon thousands of people protesting against this. And this is also ripe for some type of false flag. With this many people in a certain area, especially on July 4th, this also can be considered a potential type of false flag. Now, today they're having the Toy Gun March that seemed like it was successful, and they had the march throughout the day, and it seems like it went without a hitch. I haven't heard anything, so we can mark this off of our potential false flags. But we do have more coming up, and they are coming, and Basically, we have to remember tomorrow is the 4th of July. We've been warned about nuclear um, bombs that there's certain radioactive material that have been missing for quite a while, and these terrorists could make dirty bombs. There's also the firework um, warning from the Fed saying that people can learn how to make firework bombs off the internet. We also have the march on all the capitals with gun owners with or without loaded guns. And after this, July 18th, we also have the cyber simulation drill. We also have the National Scout Jamboree coming up, and the New York City chemical drill in the subway system. So there's still a lot of potential fall flags coming up. We don't know what their agenda is, but we do know that something will happen. Now, as we go forward here, I just wanted to read a Declaration 2.0, a fresh start for America. The history of the President of the United States is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having indirect object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these free inhabitants of the several states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to the candid world. The United States has refused to admit that the President of the United States is not bound to the Constitution of 1787 because no president has ever taken the Constitution's Article 6 oath and thereby has made the U.S. government entity an illegal de facto government. The United States has never acknowledged that it came into existence by a coup d'etat of the original American jurisdiction under the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, which has never been lawfully repealed in writing. The United States has refused to acknowledge the limits of its lawful territorial jurisdiction and the still intact laws under the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. The United States exists first and foremost as a commercial enterprise, and as such does not act in the best interest of the people, which we know. The United States government, not bound to the Constitution, has subverted its laws to forward self-serving political agendas and commercial interests. The United States effectively dissolved unalienable rights of the people under the Creator by replacing them with legislative privileges called rights, created by men and women who can also revoke them at any time. The government has been playing God. The United States government has endeavored to prevent the American population from understanding its alliance with a private central banking system that extracts the people's wealth. The United States has refused to protect the people from the emerging of government and corporations, aka corporatism. Especially disturbing is government domestic oversight by the Department of Homeland Security and the integration of military practices and functions with local law enforcement. The United States has refused to protect individual property rights and has instead succumbed to a collectivism takeover of private land ownership rights and private land under Agenda 21 Rights of Nature mandate. The United States government, due to having separate powers of the legislative and executive branches, by giving the president both the power of head of government, head of state, has encouraged dictatorship powers thereof. The United States has allowed presidents the unilateral law of executive orders when there is no explicit authority whatsoever for them. The United States has erected multitude of new offices and set hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. The IRS, Justice Department, many police, state and local revenue, and other government agencies engage in an escalating rampage of legalized theft and subsequent terror of not only those of their territorial jurisdiction, but all Americans. The United States, since the Korean War, has gone to war without consent from Congress. The United States, dependent on deficit funding by the Federal Reserve, has rendered war to be an economic necessity beyond reasonable concerns for the well-being of the people. And I'll just go on and read a couple more here. The United States government has curtailed dissent and punished whistleblowers, constraining our fellow citizens taken captive, making it difficult to impossible thereafter for them to receive due process. The United States is at this time managing large numbers of military to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy as hidden justification for economic stability. The United States has cultivated divide and conquer strategies amongst us to distract the people from recourse against an illegitimate de facto government of vast weaponry. With this, everyone, for those who are in the United States, I'm going to wish you a happy Independence Day, which means that we are independent, we are the people, we do have a voice, and we have to be prepared and ready, just like our founding fathers, who always had weapons, food, and supplies always stocked up and were always on the ready. So do we need to be ready also. Listen, everyone, thank you very much for listening. Have a great 4th of July if you're in the United States. Everyone else, have a great rest of today. And tomorrow I will be doing a report. I'm just going to do it a little bit earlier so I can enjoy a barbecue and fireworks. Hopefully the sequester allows me to have fireworks. But everyone, thanks for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.